My name is Carlos Ernesto Michaeletis, and they call me L, my alias. To put it that way, that nothing takes away from me or anything. It turns me on. I am what I am, and I'm sure of what I am. I'm not proud of what I am, but neither can I cry because I'm not here. Life goes on. Do you understand? It goes on. It's said that human beings are not born bad, but rather the environment shapes them to be who they are. This is what they say Old Man Lin's life decreed. But it's true. Stay until the end of the video and find out. Before you start, leave your registration with the like button and subscribe to our stories. They'll surely catch you. Now, activate the bell so we can begin. Lin's childhood was a whirlwind of tragedy and helplessness that pushed him down a dark and lonely path. Born in an impoverished rural area of El Salvador, Lin was the third of 5 siblings in a family where hunger and violence was a constant in his peers. His father, a violent alcoholic, abused his mother and children, leaving them physically and emotionally scarred from an early age. Lin learned that violence and aggression were viable ways of dealing with the world. His childhood was marked by a lack of affection and a constant sense of danger. He often had to search for food in the trash or steal to feed his family. School was a luxury he could rarely afford, as hard work and survival were his family's primary concerns. As he grew up, Lin became increasingly resentful and distrustful. He saw his father as a role model, a man who imposed his will through brute force. The idea that life could be different, that he could be different, seemed increasingly distant. At age 12, Lin witnessed the death of one of his brothers at the hands of a rival gang. This tragic event marked a turning point in his life, filling him with hatred and a thirst for revenge. He decided to join a local gang, where he found the sense of belonging and the protection he longed for. The gang was a family for him, a refuge in a world that had rejected him. Over time, Lin rose through the ranks of the gang, gaining respect and fear in equal measure. His reputation for being relentless and ruthless preceded him, and he embraced it as a shield against a world that had hurt him time and again. The descent into evil on the morning of January 7th, 2003, the print press proudly announced that the UN had completed verification of the peace accords, marking the close of a symbolic cycle. The word peace could be officially considered graduated and filed away in some New York office. That same night, Old Man Lin, already identified by the police as the main leader of the 18th neighborhood, El Salvador visited the Dina neighborhood in southern San Salvador to embrace and show his support for Chino Picer. The young local leader, however, ordered the execution of one of his soldiers, known as El Cush, as punishment for losing a weapon. This action outraged members of the gang, especially Cranky, the leader of the nearby Ibi neighborhood. He had influence in the area and warned Picer that the life of a gang member wasn't worth a lost weapon. Despite this, the 19-year-old Picer felt confident enough to decide for himself what was fair in his territory, in his drug market, and on the 8th streets he controlled for the leadership of the gang and for Lin, who was his visible face that same night while Lin and Picer were talking. Cranky and his lieutenant Duque arrived at Dina and waited. They approached Picer, pulled him aside, and murdered him in the street with 17 shots from AK-47s and M16s, weapons of war used to send a message to all members of the gang. The way they were being governed could not continue. Lin considered Cranky's action a betrayal, believing he should have been consulted before making that decision. For him, killing someone he had just hugged was a breach of trust. Motivated by Lin, many armed gang members searched for Cranky and Duke in the following days to avenge Picer's death, although they were unable to find them. This situation marked the beginning of a deadly confrontation to establish limits and make it clear that in the Barrio 18 neighborhood, there was only one way to punish and only one judge. In the 1970s in Los Angeles, a white man approached a Salvadoran child of about 12 years old. He was looking out the window of a restaurant and told him with a derogatory accent, "You don't speak Spanish," implying that he shouldn't speak Spanish. These words echoed in the mind of the boy who years later became a gang member, adopted the name Lintz, joined the Aim Street gang, and tattooed his First 18 as a symbol of belonging in El Salvador. Decades later, no one remembers that X that was changed to an I. Here it's Lin in the 2. July 2011. He turned 49. The influence and mystery surrounding old Lin and Barrio 18 are largely due to his enigma and the shadow he casts, which changes in height and impenetrability depending on the light and perspective from which it is viewed. His authority often seems mythical, reigning over burly, armed men. His rise to the top of the gang in late 2002 is an enigma to many, with rumors suggesting that in the 1980s he sold drugs to Barrio 18 in the United States. Although some doubt that he even speaks English or has been to the North, Lin's guerrilla past with the Central American Revolutionary Workers Party, PRTC, also contributes to his long shadow. Although he has publicly admitted his membership in the PRTC, rumors within the gang exaggerate his influence, making him appear even more formidable, as if he had learned to be tougher and more fatal in the guerrilla. This effect is also seen in other 40-somethings from Barrio 18 who serve in the army during El Salvador's Civil War. Having fought in a war grants them an aura of respect and experience that young gang members cannot match. Even despite their most violent and extreme acts, the irony that Lin's first prison was that of a captured revolutionary is not lost. At 18, in an ambush in Sonsonate in February 1981, he was imprisoned in the Sonsonate prison and then in clandestine prisons before being transferred to La Esperanza in Mariona, where he occupied a cell reserved for political prisoners. Although he was captured along with guerrilla leaders such as Arlen Yosapa and Celia Margarita Alfaro, who still received tributes from the president, Lin seems to have been forgotten by many in the FMLN. Another PRTC activist who shared a sentence with Lin remembers him with long, curly hair, always wearing a dark hat and a green cap with a pin on the visor. He was described as serious and not very fond of jokes. He was someone to talk to. It meant being willing to debate vigorously due to his seriousness and clarity of ideas. His prison record includes his imprisonment for subversion and his release by direct order of the Supreme Court on April 1, 1982. During his time in prison, Lin returned to the mountains, fighting in the Wasapa volcano under the orders of Manuel Melgar, current Minister of Security. Although his former companion assures that Lin deserted the PRTC in 1983, Lin only mentions that he returned to Los Angeles, where in the 1980s he joyfully received the first graffiti of the Mara Salvatrucha gang in neighborhoods inhabited mainly by Central Americans. He celebrated the push of the gangs, Salvadorans, in the city, being a member of the Ing Street Gang. At that time, the deadly enmity that has united MS-13 and Barrio 18 since 1989 did not yet exist. Although Lin maintained more ties to El Salvador than most young people, who grew up in Southern California, with a Salvadoran surname and nostalgia. Speaking, thinking, and acting in English, he did not put down roots there and return to his country. His shadow fades until a file reveals that he entered the Santa Ana prison on December 29, 1992, accused of robbery, but was released 6 months later after being found innocent. He returned to the same prison on October 12th for homicide. By the way, if you enjoy the video, we invite you to give us your like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. We continue to tell you what his life is like in Cecot. Since his arrival in Cecot, Lin has maintained a reserved and distant attitude, distancing himself from internal conflicts among inmates. His reputation as a gang leader has preceded him, which has earned him respect among some inmates and fear among others. However, despite his seemingly privileged position, Lin has chosen to stay out of the disputes and alliances within the prison, preferring to keep a low profile and avoid attracting attention. Lin's daily routine in prison is monotonous and bleak. He gets up early each morning to eat a bland, substanceless meal. During the day, he spends most of his time in his cell reflecting on his life and the decisions that led him to that place. He is sometimes allowed out into the yard for a few hours, where he paces in circles, lost in thought while observing the other inmates with a blank, distant stare. Lin's relationships in prison are few and superficial, although some inmates respect him for his history in the gang. Most view him with suspicion and caution, aware of his reputation for being ruthless and merciless. Lin has learned to live with loneliness and isolation, becoming his only company amidst a sea of unfamiliar and hostile faces, despite his apparent resignation to his fate. There are times when the shadow of his past grows heavier, on lonely nights when the silence of the prison envelopes him. Lin finds himself tormented by memories of his former life. He remembers the faces of those he hurt and the lives he destroyed on his way to the top of the gang. He wonders if he can ever redeem himself for his actions, if he can ever find the peace he so desperately longs for. It could be said that he had the opportunity to have a different life. Despite growing up in a difficult environment and facing numerous adversities, there were times in his childhood where he could have taken a different path if he had received the proper support and guidance. For example, if Lin had had access to a quality education, he could have developed different skills and perspectives on life. Furthermore, if he had received the necessary emotional support at home, he could have learned to manage his emotions in healthier ways and develop stronger relationships, positive attitudes toward others. However, given the circumstances of his childhood and the environment in which he grew up, Lin was pushed down a path marked by violence and crime. The lack of opportunities and pressure from his surroundings led him to make decisions that ultimately led him down a dark and dangerous path. Lin's story is a reminder of how life circumstances and opportunities can influence the course we take. Although he had the opportunity to have a different life, circumstances conspired against him, leading him down a path that would change him forever. Thus, we reach the end of this video. If you liked it, I invite you to give us a like so we can continue making more videos like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. I wish you a great day. See you next time.